And paper these.
Good evening, everyone. I call to order this February 12th, 2025 meeting of the Planning and Transportation Commission. Before we begin, I have the privilege of introducing our newest commissioner, Dr. Forrest Peterson. Welcome, Commissioner Peterson. And now, Ms. Dow, if you would call the roll.
Vice Chair Aiken,
Here.
Commissioner Heckman,
Here.
Commissioner Peterson,
Here.
Commissioner Suma, here, Commissioner Templeton, here. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Dow. So our first item is to ask if there is any public comment on items that are not on the agenda. So do we have any speaker cards or raised hands?
I have no request to speak.
Good. Then Assistant Director Armour, do we have any agenda changes, additions, or deletions?
No changes.
Okay, well, let's proceed directly to the city official reports then.
Thank you. So Assistant Director Jennifer Armour, and I will give a little bit of a preview of our upcoming meetings. So scheduled for your next meeting on February 26th, we have a vesting tentative map scheduled for 4345 El Camino Real, the planned home zoning application for 70 Encina, and an update about the bike and pedestrian plan. And then at the following meeting, March 12th, we currently have tentatively scheduled planned home zoning for 660 University, and then bringing to you the El Camino Real focus area ordinance changes. And then I will also give you an update here on some of the items that either have recently occurred or are upcoming at council in related to the work that you have done. So at the meeting on Monday, we had approval of 3265 El Camino Real. Pardon the typo there. And then we had appointment of our newest commissioners. So as mentioned, Commissioner Peterson has been able to join us here today for his first meeting. We expect Commissioner G to join us at our next meeting. And then Commissioner James's term would start in April. And then for the February 24th City Council meeting, the APR Annual Progress Report for the Comprehensive Plan and Housing element will be going for their review. It came to PTC on November 13th of last year. And with that, that is the end of my update for this evening, in case you have any questions.
I see a light from Commissioner Templeton. Would you like to step in at this point?
Yes, I just, we have the schedule in this report section as well, so I thought I would provide an update that I will not be here next week. Thank you.
At the next meeting, thank you very much.
All right. Do we have a report from Mr. Rios?
Yes, hi, thank you. Rafael Rios, Senior Engineer with the Office of Transportation. Just a brief update from me today. Yesterday, the collision data for December was sent out to the committee, or to the commission, sorry. One announcement is that the Crescent Park Traffic Calming Project, transportation staff is anticipating bringing that item to this commission in early April right now is what we're anticipating. And then the El Camino Real repaving and bike lane project by Caltrans is still ongoing, currently in the striping phases. That has potential to be delayed by the weather. It's really weather dependent whether they can do the work. And then completion of the cutting detection loops and stuff at the traffic signals is scheduled right now for June. And those are the only updates I have unless there's questions.
Questions, commissioners? Thank you, Mr. Rios. I think we're all set.
Thank you.
All right, with that, I believe we're ready to move on to our first action item. Ms. Armour, do you have a report?
So I will not be giving the report, but I will pass it off to my colleague. She can introduce herself.
Great, thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. Ashwini Kantak with the City Manager's Office. On Zoom, we are joined by Heather Gurwitz from the M Group as well as other staff in case there's questions. And we're really excited to be here today because this is a critical step in the potential permanent closure of portions of California Avenue and Ramona Street to vehicular traffic. As I think you're all aware, both these streets have been closed to vehicular traffic since June of 2020, and Council has taken several actions to continue the temporary closure. In November of 2023, Council directed staff to take the necessary actions to permanently close these streets to vehicular traffic, and today's action is part of implementing that direction. So I'll just go over briefly what the project is about today. We are recommending amending the comprehensive plan transportation element to reclassify portions of California Avenue and Ramona Street as car-free streets. We'll also be adding definitions in the glossary of the comp plan. An addendum to the comprehensive plan EIR, Environmental Impact Report, has been prepared, which supports this recommendation. Next slide, please. And so we are proposing two new street classifications, a community street and a pedestrian street. So California Avenue would be reclassified as a community street, and that would mean being restricted to pedestrians and bicycles. We would have either a speed limit or some other mechanism to ensure slow bike lanes. Emergency, utility, and maintenance vehicles would be allowed. Commercial vehicles would require approval through an exception process for special circumstances and special events such as Farmers Market and Third Thursdays. Ramona Avenue would be reclassified as a pedestrian street, and that would mean primarily restricted to pedestrians. It is a fairly short segment, about 200 feet. So to support a truly safe pedestrian zone, mounted bicycles would not be allowed for that 200-foot length of street close to cars. Similar to a community street, we would have emergency, utility, and maintenance vehicles allowed. Next slide, please. And so this shows you the project locations. Again, Ramona, between a portion of Ramona between University and Hamilton, and then California between El Camino Real and Birch Street. And the next two slides just zoom in to the two locations. So if we could just go through the next two slides. So this is the car-free portion of California Avenue. And then the car-free portion of Ramona Street. Next slide. So as noted in the staff report, the proposed resolutions, there's two resolutions that support and advance goals and policies in the comprehensive plan, both all in the land use element, natural element, and transportation element. And those examples of those are reducing emissions, encouraging walkability, revitalizing retail areas, and promoting historic preservation through consultation with the tribes. Next slide, please. Staff, along with consultants, have conducted extensive community and stakeholder outreach for both these streets. The first round was between October 2022 and April 2023. There was additional outreach done last year for CALA from February to November of 2024. And as you can see here, many tools and forums were used to engage specific stakeholders as well as the larger community, including meetings, focus groups, surveys, and public meetings. Next slide, please. So our immediate next step after today's discussion would be City Council consideration of the permanent closure. And we would be targeting either a City Council meeting in March, mid-March, or early April. The potential future next steps, which are of course contingent on council approval, would be approval and implementation of outdoor activation standards. And then phase street improvements. So we are envisioning some street improvements that would be done in multiple phases. The first phase for both California Avenue and Ramona Street would be this calendar year. Next slide, please. So as we move into the recommendation, here's some key considerations for you. Again, council direction. So council has taken several actions since June of 2020 to temporarily close these portions of California and Ramona Street and have asked us to bring back actions for permanent closure. And again, with an objective of enhancing outdoor dining, retail, and supporting economic vibrancy. We have conducted extensive stakeholder outreach over the past several years, so community and merchant engagement. We've also, as part of this particular item that we're bringing to you, we have reached out to external agencies, tribal agencies, have done consultations, and then, of course, this was noticed as a public hearing. The action is also consistent with city policies and plans, so comprehensive plan as well as the zoning ordinance. And then the environmental analysis shows that there's no new or substantially more severe significant effects compared to those in the original comp plan EIR, and there's no new mitigation measures proposed. Next slide, please. And so these are the recommendations that we would like the Planning and Transportation Commission to consider and recommend that the City Council consider the environmental analysis and adopt two resolutions, one to amend the comp plan transportation element, and the second approving the proposed street closures and setting forth the provisions for allowed uses within the street. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take questions, either myself or the staff and consultants we have on Zoom. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Kontak. Do we have any clarifying questions? Commissioner Heckman.
Thank you. This one is for Mr. Yang, if he's available. There you are. Evening, Mr. Yang. I think I know the answer to this, but I thought I should just ask and get it out of the way. Where a city is either vacating or abandoning a street, there are some processes they have to go through with the streets and highway codes. Here, we are closing it to most vehicular traffic, other than some categories, but not going so far as to vacate or abandon. So I just wanted to make sure we don't have any street and highway code steps that need to be folded into this. In this particular situation, we're just making it a pedestrian type, vehicle-free type street.
Yes, I believe my colleagues have looked into that issue and determined that no additional steps are necessary right now.
All right, thank you.
Suma.
Thank you. I have just a quick question along those lines, and that was if there was any required outreach to Caltrain, since California Avenue is a route to the station there.
Yes, thank you so much for the question. Yes, the external agencies included the Caltrans, Santa Clara Valley Transportation Authority, and then, of course, we reached out to the tribal agencies as well.
And I probably misspoke. I meant Caltrain because of the station.
Oh, okay. And I will let Heather from M Group chime in, but we have not reached out to Caltrain.
Okay.
But I'll let Heather, if you don't mind responding to that.
Thank you.
Good evening, Planning and Transportation Commissioners. My name is Heather Gerwitz, and we reached out to Sonoma County, Santa Clara Valley Transit Authority regarding connectivity, but we did not reach out to Caltrain. And Santa Clara Valley, they did provide us with feedback, but they did not just in terms of what the changes were that they were making to the bus route, but they did not have any comments or specific concerns.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Templeton.
Thank you. Just to follow up, this is a major train stop along the Caltrain path. And just to clarify, did you say you did not speak to Caltrain about this change?
So, good evening, committee members. Steve Guagliardo, Assistant to the City Manager for Economic Development. So the portion of the car-free street does not actually verge on the Caltrain station, nor impact circulation out of the Caltrain parking lot or station. The most immediate impact is on the circulation for VTA and buses coming to and from there. And that's what Heather alluded to in the correspondence and coordination with them. So
With
the portion-
respect, I'm, that sounds like a discussion question and not a question for staff, but you're saying, no, you did not speak to Caltrains and you're going to stick by that. Is that my understanding?
Yeah, so happy to let Heather elaborate more if necessary, but given the
Yeah,
impact.
it's a simple question. Did the city of Palo Alto review this change with the train service that services California Avenue, which used to be possible to drive down to get to the train station?
Prior to the status of it as a car-free street, and as Heather alluded to earlier, I do not believe that outreach was conducted to Caltrain.
So yes, so the straightforward, really clear answer is that no outreach was done to Caltrain.
Thank you for the straight answer. I very much appreciate that. And then to double down, because I know Commissioner Suma lives near this intersection, Caltrans, the owners of El Camino Real, was coordinated with to be more specific. Do we think that they would be amenable to things like fixing the light once we close the street permanently?
Again, Steve Guagliardo, happy to speak to that briefly. The short answer is yes. One of the things that we are working on with Caltrans is encroachment permits for near-term improvements at the intersection of California Avenue and El Camino Real. And one of the second pieces for the encroachment permit and more extensive work is the status of the street as a permanently closed car-free street. And so the action taken tonight by PTC and ultimately by council to amend the comp plan will aid in the processing of that encroachment permit.
Thank you.
If there are no others, I'll go ahead with my quick one. Regarding the definition of the community street where we refer to pedestrians and bicycles, and we anticipate there will be other devices, other transportation devices used there. So I gather from your earlier comment, we'll rely on a speed limit to manage that physically. The question is, since we're amending the comp plan, do we need to add a definition for the categories of vehicles that we'll be permitting there, or is bicycle sufficient? And I didn't see bicycle defined in the glossary, so that might also need an elaboration.
Thank you for that question. I'll go ahead and start and then see if any of our colleagues have something to add. I would say that that is a common enough term that it is something that doesn't need to be specifically defined in the glossary for the comprehensive plan. I think a discussion, if there are particular concerns about what would or wouldn't be allowed, could be part of your consideration. And as we move through the design portions of how more permanent upgrades are going to be done for this space and adjustments in design, I'm sure that will come into that discussion as well. But in terms of modifications to the comprehensive plan, I generally recommend not getting too specific, because then it allows us to work out those details on a case-by-case basis.
Very good. Thank you. Any other questions? If not, do we have public comment on this item?
I have no speaker cards or raised hands.
Very good. Commissioners, would you like to move on to detailed comments? Please hit your lights. Commissioner Templeton.
Thanks. I'll just jump in with follow on to my earlier question. In general, I am in favor of maintaining the closure on California Avenue. I love to hang out there. I love the amenities that having that street close to vehicular traffic provides. One of the things I'm concerned about is buy-in from Caltrain, because this is one of two train station. Well, technically there's possibly another, no, but there's two stops in Palo Alto that we need to be aware of and make sure that they feel like they're getting the full service from. And one change we have made is access to the train station, instead of being direct, now has to go in an indirect way. That is fine for me when I'm using the train, but I can imagine for people who go multiple times a day, such as public buses that go there from Stanford, or people from other group type of transit, might be concerned. And so if we haven't had a chance to talk to them about it and make sure that they're on board, I think that's a risk for the city. We'll of course weigh in, but we're not running those kinds of transit agencies. We're just individuals communicating with the individuals in the community. But for this to be effective long-term, we need their input and buy-in, I would suggest, to be successful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Looks like there's somebody who wanted to, was Mr. Gagliardo planning to, were you going to say something in response? I saw you came on the screen.
Yes, I was not sure if there was a question there, in understanding your perspective about supporting. I just wanted to add some additional context that we have also coordinated with the Stanford Research Park, who runs a shuttle as part of their transportation demand management to and from the Caltrain station. They are supportive of this action and are coordinating pieces there. And broadly, Caltrain is supportive of non-single occupant vehicle as an access mode to their stuff, to their stations. That said, you had mentioned the buses as well. And again, that's the coordination with VTA in terms of routing for their transit to and from the Caltrain station.
How are they being directed to get to the train station? Can you? Are they going to go through the neighborhood?
Routing.
Yeah, is it going through the neighborhood adjacent?
I believe the VTA, and Heather probably has more information about the routing specifics. So I'll cede to her.
Yes, hi. So bus route 89 is the route that SCVTA runs down. In the past, it ran down California Avenue. So we did reach out to them, and they now are going, right now they had a slightly, or sorry, when I talked to them in December, they had a slightly different route, but they were starting a new route in January of 2025 that would go down Page Mill Road. And the estimated increase in runtime was 5% over a 12-minute ride, so approximately 36 seconds of increased travel time.
Where's the Marguerite going?
I don't. The Marguerite?
Yeah, so the shuttle for the research park, I don't have the exact routing for that, nor do I have information about the increased time there. But as part of Stanford Research Park's outreach, we can certainly get that when we return to council.
Yeah, I think it would be a nice compliment. I noticed it wasn't in our packet or in the presentation, so I think that would cover all the bases as long as we were able to say these are the routes and these are accepted. I'm glad to hear that the VTA is not going to be going through the neighborhood to get to the train station. Yeah, I think it'd be nice to have that diagram. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Templeton. Commissioner Heckman.
Thank you. So I'm going to give some maybe overview comments in this round, and then I have some specific suggestions on the resolutions, which I'll hold for a second round. Initially, I want to say I'm supportive. I think it's exciting to re-envision this part of Cal Avenue and Ramona, and to see how we can really make it a vibrant kind of unique feature of these two landscapes in the context of the bigger commercial areas where, you know, there will be some part that's just walkable and other parts where people can drive. So I'm really excited about that. I do think regarding Caltrain, I think Commissioner Templeton raises a good point, and maybe it was, you know, California's been closed for 5 years. And perhaps, you know, the outreach wasn't made because if Caltrain had a problem with it, we would have heard about it long ago. But nonetheless, I think to me, the point is well taken that it's a T we should cross. And so this is going from us on to council. And so I'm hoping that staff will cross that T. And it may well be that Caltrain says, no, we have no issues. But if a council member asks, I think we're going to want to be able to give them that answer. So I think we should do that. The thing that the kind of the big picture idea that I'm hoping to entice my fellow commissioners to move forward as a part of this package going to council is the idea of investigating monetizing commercial use of our public streets. You know, before the pandemic, if I had a restaurant or shop on Cal Avenue and I was bursting at the seams and wanted to grow, if the place next door to me was vacant, I could go to the landlord and say, I will rent that from you. I will pay you for that, and expand my business that way. The pandemic gave us kind of an unusual new look. I mean, you know, nationwide about using public property because at the time it was safer. And now I think we, by and large, no longer have that issue. But we found that there are, that doing it really adds to the vibrancy of our communities. And so here we are considering really making it permanent. But I do think that it's appropriate to at least consider whether there should be a fee for that. And you know, the amount of that fee, that is sort of a second question, whether, you know, obviously it would be, you know, appropriate to not dissuade businesses from creating a more vibrant area, but also significant enough that it could provide some, you know, additional funding to the city, which of course we're always looking for. So I'm hoping that some of my fellow commissioners might think about that and consider including it in the recommendation. Again, I'm just talking about sort of the general recommendation to investigate the possibility, see what other communities are doing, that sort of thing at this point. So I'm going to conclude my my general comments now, and I'll come back for a second round. Thanks.
Mr. Valiardo.
I'm sorry, was I acknowledged?
Yes.
I just wanted to chime in response to that comment. Fully appreciate the comment, and that is consistent with prior council direction received on this. So other uses of the public right-of-way, such as our parklet program that applies to outdoor dining establishments that are sited next to vehicular traffic, have to pay a fee, both a permit fee and a license fee for the space. And previous council direction has been, as we develop permanent outdoor dining and activation guidelines for California Avenue and Ramona Street, to apply a similar template. So rest assured, Commissioner Heckman, it is not only explored, it is expected as we develop the guidelines for the use of that space by private entities.
Thank you. Glad to hear it.
Commissioner Suma.
Thank you. I have a few sort of questions and comments, but in general, you know, I think that this is all good, and obviously council has given very clear policy direction. Do I agree with every single word? Probably not, but none of it is significant enough to rise to occasion. And I was just concerned there was a requirement to get Caltrain buy-in, and that's why I asked the question, just to make sure we were being prudent. So That's the only thing. And then I have a few other comments in no particular order. Back at page 29, section 3, there's additional rules for for the closed streets. And I was wondering if it would be good here to mention that the speed for non-pedestrians, bicycles, and other vehicles, whatever the correct term is for scooters and what is it? Other modes of transit, that's fine. I thought there was something for scooters and electric scooters and bikes, but anyhow, that will be controlled by speed limits. I thought maybe that was good to add there. And then on packet page 11, this was just a little confusing to me. It refers to map T5 in the comp plan. And it sort of explains this also, that map T5 in the comp plan, and in fact, the definitions of different kinds of streets is not listed in the comp plan. It's like it's missing, I think. And it's odd because I worked on the comp plan, but I was not on that subcommittee. And so it says local / collector streets, and there's no differentiation, but there is a much better map actually on the transportation, on the City of Palo Alto website for the Office of Transportation that is more accurate and might be better to use instead of the comp plan map T5. So that was just an observation. And then back at page 14, we're going to replace 2 of the 3 identified ADA spots on Cal Ave. I would urge us moving forward because we're going to have lots of situations like this potentially, to replace all or as many as we can. I mean, it's really important for persons with disabilities to park close. We did have one letter from someone, or maybe it was a comment on Palo Alto Online or something, about a person who felt they would no longer be able to use California Avenue because of ADA accessibility issues. So I think replacing all, not 2/3 or most of the spaces we're missing, it should be a goal here. And then lastly, I did not see, but perhaps I missed it, any specific consideration of impacts on circulation for vehicles to and from the new safety building. Did I miss it? Or?
Heather?
Yes, hi. So we don't necessarily break it down by building, but there was a traffic impact analysis that was done by a traffic engineer. And the result of that is that basically there's overall, prior to street closure, there's been a decrease in actual vehicle traffic. So there's no impacts from the project.
Okay, I saw that, of course, but I was just wondering if there had been any specific analysis of potential impacts on the safety building, but the answer is no, it's wrapped into the whole thing. So, those are all my comments. Thank you.
Commissioner Peterson.
Thank you.
Nice ring to that.
Thank you. So I have a quick question. And I'm not sure if this is for M Group, but it probably is. There's alleyways that run on either side of California Avenue. And right now, I mean, those were delivery addresses. If you walk down those alleyways, one's New Mayfield and the other one, I don't see what the name is, but is there a plan to do improvements on those what were alleyways into actual more of a frontage road for the businesses on Cal Ave, and then also maybe replace the ADA parking on the alleyways? But I did see the reference to the parking garage. There's a new parking garage. There's also public parking on the other side of California Avenue. But that is quite a ways, to try to navigate the entire street from just those parking garages. Thank you.
Steve or Bruce, can you take that question?
Good evening, Commissioners. Steve Guagliardo again. Happy to speak to the idea of improvements to the alleyways as they become used even more. So what we've seen from the closure in summer of 2020 is that those alleyways become the primary delivery routes. And what we continue to do is explore how they're being used and make sure that they're being used effectively and efficiently. We have started a project with Public Works to look at Lot 8, which is on Jacaranda, which is the other alleyway that I believe you were referencing, Commissioner, and seeing what can be done there. We continue to work with businesses on the location of their dumpsters and waste enclosures in those alleyways to make sure they're sited appropriately so vehicles can navigate there. And as we continue to talk about the future of Cal Ave, once this necessary procedural step is through this commission and then council, happy to look at what options there may be for further improvements.
Chair, can I ask a follow-up question?
Please do.
So on the alleyways, yeah, of course, where the dumpsters, the garbage and everything else, but I was thinking also the pathways for egress. There's a lot of legacy probably to code in the 1960s or 70s, but probably not to code today for handicap ramps. I mean, the ramps are probably there, but if you try to walk from the parking lots, onto Cal Ave, it's a little bit of a even walking, I have to watch where I'm going to make sure I don't fall over something.
Yeah, understood. And so on that question, in terms of pedestrian access from parking lots through, I think one of the things we have in the visioning and as we propose the designs, again, once we're through these necessary procedural steps, is looking at how to enhance those alleyways. And that includes not just aesthetically, but also functionally. And not just the alleyways themselves, but to your point, the full path of travel and the experience of a patron on California Avenue from as they pull in either parking or bicycling or whatever mode of transit they're taking, and then getting from, if they park a car, from the parking lot to the street itself.
All right, thank you. An elderly resident actually stopped me on California Avenue and for this reason asked me to help carry her bags to her car in one of those parking lots simply to navigate. So it's a real example. Thank you.
If there are no others for this round, I'll make my one comment on this. I did review the EIR addendum, and that looks fine after the usual translation from EIR speak. The reduction in traffic volumes around Cal Ave is really eye-opening. It's sort of hard to draw many conclusions from that. But nevertheless, I think I'm comfortable accepting the idea that there will be no new significant impacts. So no objection there. All right, shall we begin with the next round? Commissioner Heckman.
Thank you. So reading through the resolutions, I've got some suggestions for staff to consider. And as I usually do on these, I'm not asking staff to comment back, yay or nay, on anything right now, just to consider it. And I'm hoping that in our motion at the end of this, that the motion will include latitude for staff to make whatever changes they consider are appropriate based upon the feedback they've gotten here. So I want to start with the second resolution in our packet, which starts on packet page 24. That's the resolution for closure. And then we'll go back to the first resolution, which is the resolution to amend the comp plan. So in the resolution for closure, it's very lengthy set of recitals, A through Y. And it's clear from the context that this was a resolution that kept growing from the initial temporary closure through each successive temporary closure, providing sort of, what was happening with the pandemic and why we wanted to extend the temporary closure. And that was great for its time. But now we're past that time. And now what we're doing is for reasons that are not based on public health or safety or streets and highways code, we've decided this is a good thing. Even though its origin may have been the pandemic, that's not the reason we're doing it. And in fact, I noticed in, this has been sort of carried out so long, I noticed in recital R, It refers to the high likelihood that the pandemic will continue through the end of 2021. But I believe at this point, we can clean up this resolution by getting rid of recitals C through I, N, O, P, and R. I think all of those were useful in their time, but really are distracting to the purpose of this resolution today. Let's see. Next on packet page 27, at the top of the page, we have recitals X and Y. And so I'm going to, Y, well, X is the Planning Commission recommendation, and Y is, provision Y is the council considered those recommendations. And what our recommendation is to amend the map and the glossary. That's in the first resolution, and that's reflected in Y, and the glossary is not in X. But that's part of it, so I would suggest that staff consider adding after the reference to T-5 and the glossary, so that we have consistency there. And then next, packet page 29, section 3.1. The way this is currently written, as determined by the city manager, emergency vehicles shall be permitted access only during an emergency or blah, blah, blah. Well, I know we're not saying that if there's an emergency, police or fire have to go check with the city manager. And I think what was intended will be accomplished if you take as determined by the city manager from the front of the first sentence and move it to the back of the second sentence. Because that's the second sentence is really what you're talking about is these discretionary accesses, not emergency accesses. So you could consider that. And then let's see, on the same page 29, 3.2. So we have new definitions in our code and our comp plan for pedestrian only street and community street. And we have those same definitions in both of these resolutions. And under those definitions, some travel is allowed and some is restricted. And one of the things I noticed is that city utility and maintenance vehicles are allowed. Whereas private utility or maintenance vehicles, if I have to, get a repair person to my shop, those are restricted because you have to get city permission, and that's what it says in 3.2. But if you look at the definitions of both, let's start with pedestrian only streets on page 29. It says streets that are restricted to these pedestrian only streets are streets that are restricted to pedestrian, emergency vehicle, and utility and maintenance vehicles only. I think you need the word city utility there because that's what is allowed without restriction. And I think you need to distinguish that so that there aren't people who get themselves in private entities and companies who get themselves in trouble and look at these code provisions. So I think in both definitions, you need the word city before utility. And you may need to clarify that private utility or maintenance vehicles are allowed on a restricted basis, just the way you have, and I think that's actually covered in commercial vehicles are allowed on a restricted basis, which is stated in the second definition, the community street. So those same comments apply on packet page 20 to the first resolution that you should consider making that reference to city utility and maintenance vehicles being allowed and somehow, because remember, these are two standalone resolutions and somebody reading the comp plan won't have the benefit of 3.2 of the ordinance necessarily. And so I think you want it to stand on its own and so that people don't get confused and unintentionally do the wrong thing. So let's see. Yeah, and the only, and just sort of picking up on a note I made that's consistent with a couple of the other commissioners, we have referred here to bikes when they are and aren't allowed, but there are other, there are scooters, motorized and not, skateboards, those sorts of things. And so just give some thought to whether there's going to be some vagueness here and people are going to think, okay, well, it says no bikes, but it doesn't say no scooters, so I can bring my scooter or whatever. So give that a little thought. Those are my clarifying suggestions for the resolutions. Thank you.
Commissioner Suma?
Thank you. Thank you for those comments. I was also struck by the many unnecessary COVID references. But could you just repeat, you want to remove C through I and then N, O, and P?
And R.
And R,
Yep.
okay. Thank you.
I see no other lights at the moment. If there are no other comments, perhaps it's time to make a motion. Commissioner Heckman.
Let me give it a try. Let's see. I will move the staff recommendation plus the recommendation that that staff have the liberty to make whatever changes to either resolution that they feel are warranted based upon the comments they've heard from commissioners tonight as this makes its way toward council, that staff consult with Caltrain before this reaches council on any views they may have about the closure of Cal Ave. And I think that's it. I think given what our staff has said, I don't think I need to include anything about monetizing the public right-of-way.
I'll second.
Just a question. Do you feel that you need to be specific about the changes that we're considering, or shall we just assume all of those that you described in your previous comment?
So my intention by the way I worded the motion was staff has taken notes and we have a transcript, and they will use their best judgment to make or not make changes to the resolution. I'm comfortable with that.
And through the vice chair, if any commissioners have concerns about any of the comments that Commissioner Hickman suggested, we would welcome that feedback now, but we would be assuming that the recommendation includes consideration of all of those that were laid out in his last comment.
Very good. Commissioner Suma.
Thank you. Just a question for the maker and the seconder. Would you consider incorporating the idea of no net loss of ADA and particular attention, as our newest commissioner mentioned, improvements to the alleyways and pathways, which is on packet page 14 for ADA accessibility? Or do you?
So I guess I don't know where the additional ADA spot would go. And I suspect if there was an easy place to put it, they would have already put it there. So I'm hesitant to recommend that we're requiring that, but I think it's appropriate to recommend that they investigate if there's a location for the lost spot.
Consider. If I said require, I didn't mean it. I meant consider.
Yeah.
Given how much city parking we have around there, I think this is an achievable goal, and I'm happy to support that if it's included as well.
Yeah, so as the maker of the motion, I'm comfortable with that amendment. Now, if we can just talk for a minute about Commissioner, the idea of the improvements to the alleyways. Can one of you sort of restate how you'd like to see that in the motion?
If I could, through the chair, I welcome this discussion, but I did want to point out that those kinds of improvements will be part of the next stages of this process, and that will be returning to you for further discussion at a future meeting.
Yeah, it's just a broad idea of incorporating it into the motion to indicate our interest in those issues. Not to be prescriptive at all.
Yeah, so I think this is really similar to what I'm hearing on my monetization issue, is that it's part of the plan already. And so because we know that it's part of the plan, and I appreciate staff clarifying this part of the plan, I don't think we need to fold it into the motion.
I would go so far as to say the fact that we're saying, hi, if this comes back to us and doesn't have that, we're going to say something. Like, we've already communicated that very effectively. So I agree, we want to see that. And it sounds to me like staff, and you can confirm, it sounds like staff hears that loud and clear.
That's fine. It doesn't have to be in the motion for it to be on the record, so.
Yeah, exactly.
Message received.
Okay, so the motion as amended includes the consideration of finding an additional ADA parking space appropriately located.
Very good. Staff, do you consider that adequately formed for your purposes?
I believe so. I'll give a moment just in case any other member of staff wants to jump in, but no, that should be sufficient. Thank you.
All right, seeing no further comments, Ms. Dow, would you take the vote?
Commissioner Templeton,
Yes.
Commissioner Heckman,
Yes.
Vice Chair Aiken,
Yes.
Commissioner Peterson,
Aye.
Commissioner Suma,
Yes.
motion carries 5-0.
Very good. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ms. Contact. All right, let's proceed to item 3, a study session on procedural rules. And Ms. Armour, do you have a presentation?
Yes, thank you. No particular presentation. This is just an item that the chair requested be brought forward for clarification. We have an element of the procedural rules for the Planning and Transportation Commission that specifies that the speaker time can be reduced down to 3 minutes. However, that is inconsistent with our other boards and commissions, as well as the standard language that we have in the agenda. And so it's led to some confusion. Those other documents actually specify that it can, if there are a lot of speakers, be reduced down to 2 minutes instead of 3. So hopefully this is a pretty straightforward thing. It gives the chair the flexibility whether they are going to allow the full 5 minutes per speaker or reduce it down to 4, 3, or 2.
Thank you. Thank you. Any comments? Commissioner Templeton.
Yes, it's interesting that we're talking about this. Is something that Commissioner Suma has long brought up as an inconsistency, and so I'm glad we're going to talk about it. I guess the thing I'm going to say is if we put it down to 2 minutes, what's to prevent everybody from always doing 2 minutes? I don't know. I mean, if it's more important to be consistent, but oftentimes we have in the past even tried to shorten it to 1 minute. Like what's the magic about 2 minutes? And is it just because some other commissions have chosen that, or staff, is there any reason that 2 is the magic number?
It's just the more standard number. It's also something that I'm familiar with from other agencies.
More standard.
So it
Is there an international standard on public comment length?
not international, but across the boards and commissions that we
I mean, I've seen
manage.
in city council, they've shortened it to 1 minute before. So
Right.
what's to say that that's not correct?
And what I would add is that the amount of time that's provided just to start at 5 minutes rather than say starting with 3, or for the applicants and appellants that they get to start with 15 minutes is actually quite a lot more than a lot of other agencies. So
Yep.
there is room for other adjustments. If the planning commission would like to consider other modifications, that could be considered. The hope was just to bring a little bit of consistency and uniformity to what is in
I
other
would love to
locations.
see the absolute bare minimum be 1 minute, and I would like you to implement that across the board, the city. So that's what I have to say about that. Not because I think that people should only speak for 1 minute. I think that you need to make it clear that that's an extreme. If the chair needs to go down to that, there should be a really good reason, like 100 people in the room.
Thank you for that suggestion.
Having chaired meetings in which we've had 100 people in the room, I will say that there are times when that is absolutely necessary. And I understand that when city council does it as well, not in any way implying that that should be our standard. Thank you.
Commissioner Peterson.
All right, Commissioner Templeton was quicker to the button than I was. That was exactly what I wanted to suggest as well, was 1 minute. A question I have is, are speakers allowed to combine their minutes into a amalgamated, say, 6 minutes that one speaker is able to take?
Yes, that is a separate section of the procedural rules, that there are specific allowances for somebody to speak on behalf of a group.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Heckman.
I think since we're tackling this, it should be done in a way that gives the PTC chair maximum flexibility. And I think that when our council, on occasion, provides a 1 minute time, then that's a signal to us. I think that there may be appropriate circumstances. They may be very few and far between, but there can be appropriate circumstances for limiting time to 1 minute to be able to get through the PTC's business in a time where most of the public in an event like that aren't, struggling to stay awake. And so the decision to reduce down from 5, which incidentally, in my experience, is pretty unusual also. I'm in most jurisdictions I work in, whether it's at the council or planning commission level, it's typically 3 minutes for either someone who's not the applicant or the appealing opponent, is typically 3. So 5, I think, is very generous, but I think our chair should have the discretion appropriately exercised to go down to 1 minute. So I'd be supportive of that.
Commissioner Suma.
Actually, I'm supportive of 2 minutes. I'm supportive of the staff recommendation as stated. My concern with that Commissioner Templeton mentioned was a different issue about timing, actually. But I just, but anyhow, I'm happy with 2 minutes since that was the request of the chair, I guess, and staff's recommendation. I prefer that to 1 minute. I don't see the need to reduce it further. It's really hard sometimes say anything substantive in 1 minute. So I prefer the 2 minutes, but.
Commissioner Templeton.
There was no but.
Yes, I would, in most circumstances, be much happier if we were to limit it to amounts where speakers could speak more. But if we're talking about extreme cases, then I want to make sure that we don't have to argue about it that evening. We've had a situation recently where that was a discussion. I'm not sure if you were here that night, but where we had to debate about what's the possibilities and how low could the minutes be restricted. So if the chair is asking for flexibility, you want to provide it, and then we can decide at that time, is this a 2-minute, a 3-minute situation? But I think 1 minute should not be the default. I think it should just be the option. Specifically, I would never want it to be less than that. Right? 2 minutes, I could see there's situations where you'd rather have it done to 1 minute instead of 2 minutes. Pretty rare. But I would say that should be included in the realm of possibilities. However, that'll be up to us to work with the chair and with each other about what are our norms. And I think our norms should be, first reduction might be 3 minutes, second reduction would be 2 minutes, and only in very rare circumstances, 1 minute, that kind of thing. But we can discuss that at a retreat or offline or whatever is appropriate. So I would, this is not a voting one, is it?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I actually was going to jump in. Unfortunately, it appears it was listed as a study session on the agenda instead of an action item, which was the intent. So we will have to bring this back to you. I probably will try and just have it on consent or something so that we don't need to have further discussion, but I'll confirm with the city attorney on that procedure. What that does mean is if there are other details that you'd like me to consider adjusting, for example, the time for applicants and appellants to speak, to shorten it. I heard one comment in terms of the timeframes maybe being longer than they need to. I would welcome those suggestions if you'd like me to add a little bit more into this item, since we are going to have to bring it back to you anyway.
All right, thank you. I have some comments too, but I believe Commissioner Peterson is up first.
Just quickly to address the minimum amount of time. Pretty sure some of the commissions and councils include something of a calculation where they have to have more than, say, 30 speakers before they could reduce it down. So I think we could address that issue by just adding some kind of minimum amount of speaker time.
Great suggestion.
Commissioner Heckman?
So I don't know that we really have a consent function on our agenda, at least I don't, but we haven't used it much. But for this particular one, since it was our chair who initiated the idea of having the discussion and our chair couldn't be here tonight, I'd prefer just make it a regular agenda item so that we don't have to do procedures to get out of consent, so that our chair can weigh in on the issue.
Yes, we could do that.
And my comment will tag on to Commissioner Peterson's. As I reviewed the procedural rules before the meeting tonight, it seemed to me that the general intent was to target a time period, total maximum time period for comments. So you'll see references to a half hour, for example. And the time limit for an individual speaker, if you have enough speakers, will exceed, we would eventually exceed that limit, but it seemed like the intent was just to manage to a total time rather than to a total number of speakers, but in the end, very similar approach. So my inclination would be to say, yeah, it's going to be rare that we have 30 speakers, but perhaps in a case like that, we would want the 1 minute limit. And we very rarely have appellants, but if we had a lot of appellants, then we might want to change the 15-minute limit as well.
And speaking of procedural, did we ask for public comment on this item? If not, let's do that now, just to make sure that we don't have anybody joining us on Zoom or in person to comment.
Thank you for the reminder. Almost made it through the meeting without that. Ms. Dow, do we have any public comment?
No, I have no request to speak.
Thank you.
Commissioner Suma.
Yeah, I think it should come back. I agree with Commissioner Heckman on especially if we're going to consider other adjustments besides the one that was agendized. It's kind of tricky. And, the appeal process is not free. So I think giving a fair amount of time is fair. So in general, I have a very strong preference, even though it can be hard on us sometimes, of hearing the public and giving them as much time as we reasonably can.
Right, thank you. Any other comments on this item?
I will say, I agree. I think it's one of the most important functions of our commission, is to be able to hear from the public. So we need to be thoughtful about that. I like the suggestions you have about how to be more objective about when we apply these changes. Looking forward to having it come back.
Commissioner Heckman?
Yeah, it just occurred to me, I think one of the procedures that our current chair has instituted is the cutoff time for when you can make it be known that you want to speak. And Vice Chair and Acting Chair, since you reviewed our procedural rules before this and I did not, I was wondering if that's covered in our procedural rules, or when this comes back. If it's not, maybe we should include that in our discussion too, so that again, we have a uniform rule that, follows the chair.
I don't recall for sure. I think that was mentioned for council, but not for commission. So we could certainly bring that back.
Okay, thank you.
I think staff added it to be consistent with council is what I thought happened. Maybe.
We definitely work to do that, but I can go back and check.
Okay.
Yeah, it would be nice to be really consistent and fair about the application of that rule. Thank you.
All right, seeing no other lights, if we've provided sufficient guidance for the return of this item, then we can move on to commissioner questions, comments, and announcements. No lights? Oh. Right. I had a few brief ones. So I attended the Stream Corridor Protection Community Meeting last week. And that was well worthwhile. I know several of you also attended remotely. Just as I can't really do it justice in just a few sentences, but as the quickest summary that I can come up with, the Edgewood residents have security as their greatest issue, and the 40-foot streamside setback, which runs through their existing homes, is probably next. On the flip side, there was concern from a number of parties that we're not doing enough to improve the riparian buffers for channelized streams. So all of those are things to give a little more weight next time we consider the issue. We've received several detailed public comments, and based on what I heard, staff will be addressing many of the specifics by the time the ordinance next comes before us. So that's encouraging as well. Commissioner Suma and I visited several of the properties on Edgewood just to get a better sense of the situation, and I thought that was well worthwhile. So if you have the chance to do that, I recommend that as well. And lastly, I'm sorry Chair Chang couldn't be with us tonight, and I hope she recovers quickly. We'll have all seven of us here next time, I hope.
I don't need to speak.
I can repeat that again. I have a family obligation next Wednesday, and I will be enjoying the dulcet tones of the school choir with my lovely children in performance duties. So I'll be happy to rejoin you guys after that, but sometimes things that happen on Wednesdays cannot be avoided. Meantime, I trust you all to keep up the good work. And I will say, since I do have the mic on, and we didn't all get our chance to welcome Commissioner Peterson, welcome. We're glad to have you here. If anybody else wants to chime in, feel free before the adjournment comes.
It is a pleasure to have you here, and we look forward to a lot of good discussions. And as always, I've told people that what I was looking for new commission members were the people who would think of things that I wouldn't. So I think you fit that bill nicely.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Commissioner Suma?
I'll pile on with congratulations and nice to see our newest commissioner. Hopefully, it's a good omen that this was a very brief meeting. So that might be your work. And I was going to mention, but Vice Chair Aiken did already, that I also attended by Zoom the stream meeting and that we made some site visits. That's it.
Very good. If there is nothing else, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.